What is going on, alpha males? Welcome to the Alpha Male Podcast, the podcast where we talk about what it means to be a man the right way, strong, made in the image of God, and don't apologize, making godly men strong and making strong men godly. So today, hopefully is going to be a fun episode for everybody. It might tick some people off. I'm okay with that. It's okay if you disagree with me. Anyway, today is going to be an episode on tactical MythBusters. Busting some of the tactical myths or manly myths that are prevalent in kind of this culture. If you want to check out Good Shepherd Training, I don't often mention it, but there is quite a bit of merchandise on there if you want to support the podcast that way. The number one way to support is to click the Patreon link. It'll be in the show notes, or just go to Good Shepherd Training and click on the Patreon link. If you want to skip the bio, skip around 3 minutes and 45 seconds, and we'll get into the topic. Who am I? A question we should all ask ourselves. I am, first and foremost, a servant of God, made in His very own image, a follower of Jesus Christ, a simple man called by God to the Great Commission to share the good news of Jesus Christ. Next, a little bit about my background and what God has allowed me to do and bless me to do in life. Grew up what most would consider very poor in the backwoods of the southeastern and mid-Atlantic United States, hunting and fishing. Joined the Marine Corps at 17. Did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. So a decorated Marine Corps combat veteran. Infantry assaultman. After the combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. I also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also a veteran of law enforcement. I served with LAPD. I was a sworn peace officer, a cop for LAPD. I worked regular patrol assignments and more specialized assignments. One of those more specialized assignments was warrant service, fugitive recovery. Also had some other law enforcement roles. I am an FBI certified firearms instructor and been certified by another 3-letter government agency in a lot of firearms and training things. I've also been a private contractor, worked in the private sector pertaining to tactics and gunfighting and protecting America from enemies foreign and domestic. I served as the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters in a large metropolitan area. That was our primary mission, to stop active shooters, which sadly are a thing in America today. I've also been blessed to do quite a bit of competition shooting. Started my first formal competitions even before joining the Marine Corps at 17. I had won more shooting competitions than I can remember. I have competed in all manner of disciplines in shooting. I've been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion, West Coast regional champion. Like I said, been blessed to win more shooting competitions than I can remember. Mentioned hunting. I've hunted to put meat on the table starting when I was a child. I've also been a professional big game hunter and guide, hunting and slaying all manner of beast. And I don't apologize for that. Humbled to be the host of 3 podcasts. Simple Man Sermons, Alpha Male Podcast, and Gunfighter Life. Obviously, as things not mentioned, I've been blessed to do many other things. But, again, first and foremost, I'm a servant of God, a believer and follower of the Bible, the Word, Jesus Christ. And I don't apologize for that. With that, let's transition into today's topic. Okay, so let's start with a myth. That the crossbow is a good end-of-the-world kind of apocalypse weapon. And I think it got this way because it looks cool on TV. It looks cool. It's a cool-looking weapon. I'll admit that. And I will admit that I really liked The Walking Dead, at least the first couple of seasons. I stopped watching it after a while, but the first couple of seasons were really good. And I, like Daryl's character. However, that doesn't make the crossbow a good gun for the end of the world, especially not a zombie apocalypse. It's a horrible gun. Or I should say it's a horrible weapon. It has a ridiculously low rate of fire. If you've ever gotten a modern crossbow and tried to cock it, they are ridiculously slow to load. Yes, they were used in warfare in, medieval times and things like that, but they were used in volley. They were used by groups of men, shooting massive volleys of bolts through the air. It's just a horrible weapon, especially the modern ones, because they're so powerful that you need specially constructed, carbon fiber or maybe aluminum, although those have mostly gone by the wayside, arrows. You're not just making your own on the fly in the end of the world. They're very specific. They're not like an old school crossbow where you can just make your own arrows. And again, the number one thing about them is they're just really slow to load. Fine if you're able and legal to deer hunt with them, but for like a melee weapon or anything kind of combative use, it's just a myth. It's a fun myth. It's cool looking. They're cool looking weapons. And they are quiet, but go ahead and shoot one side by side, a crossbow, compared to like a bolt action 22 with 22 shorts. Like a long barreled bolt action or 22 calibres. They're very quiet, even without a silencer, and they have a much higher rate of fire. It's just a bad apocalypse weapon. Since we're on that one, I may as well continue and upset some more people. The compound bow, like the modern hunting compound bow, I hunted with one of those for years. They're also a horrible combat weapon for anything. I don't care what Rambo did with it. They're really impractical. I'm talking a modern compound bow. They are super high tech, very complex to manufacture, not simple like the older bows. I think older bows have a lot of merit. Recurves, long bows. You can make a new string for those. You're not making a new string for a modern compound bow if you break one, wear one out, something like that. You're not just fashioning a new cam for one of those if something breaks. They're very high tech material. Not only that, but just like the crossbow, they are very, very powerful. And for good reason, for hunting. They're designed for hunting. Yeah, if you want to shoot a deer at 40 yards, you want a flat trajectory, which means you want a lot of power. You want that arrow to drop as little and strike with as much force as you can muster. But that means those arrows are specially constructed of, mostly today, carbon fiber. They're very high tech. You're not just making new arrows. You can't just safely shoot a wooden arrow out of I would consider a modern high-powered compound bow, 50, 60, 70-pound draw. It's not safe. You're not just making new arrows, and the arrows that you have to buy are so complex. Things get really bad. I can make my own ammo, and I don't mean reloading with components. I mean taking and reusing brass, which is reusable. I can reuse the primer dish. I can make my own priming compound. I'm not going to tell you guys how to do that. You can make your own priming compound. You can make your own black powder, and I can reload something like a shotgun shell or a 38 special with much lower technology. Fire it with black powder, find old wheel weights in a parking lot, and cast lead projectiles. Much lower tech than modern carbon fiber arrows with their fletchings and their glue and all that. And they're so high power that you'll know this if you spend any time doing archery. If you shoot something that's not like a designated target, and even a lot of times when you shoot a deer or something like it, those arrows are not usable again. Sometimes they are, but a lot of times they're not. So they're not like a continuously reuse item. So that, and it does have a much higher rate of fire than a crossbow. But modern compound bows are meant to be drawn and held back and aimed and then fired. You're not doing like snap shooting with them the way you can do with a recurve bow or a long bow or something like that, where you can just be carrying the bow and then quickly draw and fire it. That's not how they were designed to be used. That's not how they are used. And that would be very handy to have if you had to use it in a martial application. So again, the modern compound bow, a lot of deer hunters and stuff like that have them, and I love archery hunting. I have a bow. Mine is a recurve. I went after years and years of doing compound bow to recurve for a lot of those reasons. If something bad were to happen, I can make my own arrows for a recurve, and I can fire it very quickly. But anyway, the modern compound bow, that if you have a bow, it's somehow some great, catastrophe weapon. Not a modern compound bow anyway, I don't think so. Another big thing I see, and even from people that are my friends, is that not everything can be boiled down to a meme or to a short TikTok video or Instagram video or something like that. Just because you watch a bushcrafting video on how to make a fire doesn't mean that you can do that. A meme or a video does not equal skill. It does not equal ability. It may equal knowledge. An easy example of this would be a bowline knot. I encourage you, if you listen to the Manly Skills episode, to have a couple of go-to knots that you know, and not like a pretzel knot, like an actual knot. Anyway, the bowline knot. You could watch a video 5 times, 10 times on how to tie a bowline knot, but until you actually get the reps in and practice over and over again doing it yourself, you're not going to be good at tying a bowline knot. You could watch videos on all the history of bowline knots and all the things they're good for and all the best rope and this thing and that thing, but until you actually do it and tie it over and over again from different positions, different angles on different things, again, repetition after repetition, you're not going to be proficient in tying a bowline knot. You have to do it. You can watch a ton of videos on long-range shooting and scopes and mils versus MRADs, and you can know all the terms and all this and this thing and that thing. If you don't actually get out and put rounds down range and put your finger on the trigger and get reps in with a smooth trigger pull and a bunch of other stuff, you're not a long-range shooter. You're just not. You can't watch enough videos to make you a long-range shooter. You have to do it. On that topic, let's maybe make some more people mad and talk about a myth in the long-range shooting community. They think if they have the gun that somebody else uses for long-range shooting and they have the optic that somebody else has, that they can do it. They forget about all the other things. I've done a bit of precision rifle shooting. How about making a wind call? A lot of that, especially you do it in competition or formally, you have wind socks, which is like a small flag at different yardage lines, because the wind can change between 100 yards and 500 yards and 1,000 yards. It can change quite a bit in intensity and direction depending on landscape. You have to know how to do that and have actual flags, which has limited applicability in the real world and like martial applications. You have to have a kestrel or something like it. You probably should have a very large spotting scope or a very good pair of binos. You should have the ability to call your shots, which is a hard skill to have and maintain. To be able to call the shot and know where it went before you actually see it and confirm it. There's a lot that goes into it. Those are just a few things. Just because you have a rifle and a scope, and maybe even you went the extra mile and had a table printed out and taped it to your rifle, there's nothing wrong with that. I like doing that too. Somehow you're going to be able to do that. There's a lot more that goes into that than just those few things. There's a lot more that goes into that than just a rifle and an optic. I'm watching some YouTube videos on how mills work. There's a lot more to it than that. On that non distance, another myth is people vastly overestimate distance. Think about, and hunters are really bad for this sometimes. You ask them how far they shot this, and they're like, oh, I shot it at 200, 250 yards. And then you ask them, did you range find it? Well, no, but I know. Well, I don't know how you can know that. And think about, if you're a deer hunter, how hard it is to see a deer in the woods. Now, 100 yards is a pretty close distance. Most people consider that not long range at all. Think about trying to see a deer 100 yards away. Nothing about trying to see a deer 200 yards away. No, plenty of people shoot deer farther than that. I certainly have done quite a bit of hunting. But I also, if I'm shooting out past, 100, let's say 200 yards, I'm going to use a rangefinder. Because there's a big difference in bullet drop between, let's say, 238 yards and 273 yards. Most people, myself included, can't just look and tell how far away that is. So unless you have a rangefinder, you don't really know. And again, in my experience as a hunter and being around people that hunt and stories and being a professional big game hunter and guide, people greatly overestimate distance. I would venture that the vast, vast majority of deer and a lot of other things taken is well inside of 200 yards. But keep that in mind, myth versus reality, when you get ready for this year's hunting season. Don't think that you necessarily need anything to shoot out to 800 yards, 1,000 yards. Because a lot of times you will sacrifice the ability to shoot inside of 25 yards. And I've shot in far more animals inside 25 yards than I have out past 300 yards. Another real common myth that cops are gunfighters. Cops are not gunfighters. Cops are administrators. Cops are there to maintain order, enforce a law, detain somebody and bring them before a magistrate. They're not gunfighters. They carry a gun just in case. Just like most concealed carriers carry a gun just in case. A lot of cops, you'll be surprised, don't even know a lot about guns, don't shoot a lot, and honestly, I'm an FBI certified firearms instructor. I've taught a ton of law enforcement. They don't shoot very well. Think about what the average, and this is not every cop. A lot of cops take it upon themselves to go shoot competition and train more often, but the vast majority don't. Think about, if you're an avid shooter, if you're listening to this podcast, the Alpha Male Podcast, Gunfighter Life, you probably are. The average, a lot of departments train twice a year. They qualify with their handgun, they shoot twice a year. Think about that with any other skill, and think if that equals proficiency in that thing. A lot of cops, sadly, other than like maybe cleaning it or something like that, will never use their gun, never train with it other than those couple of times a year they have to qualify. Let's say some agencies are really good, some are every month. Okay, once a month. That does not equal, I guess it equals removal of liability, but it doesn't really equal being good with a gun. How good would I be if I only bench press once a month? Or how good would I be at running if I only ran once a month? You get the idea? Shooting is a perishable skill, just like running is. You may know how to run, you may understand how it works, you won't be as good as the person that runs or does cardio regularly, right? It's just a reality. So cops are not gunfighters. They are administrators. Ask any cop honestly. Talking about a regular cop, SWAT and stuff like that is different, but your average patrol cop. It's a tough job. I was a cop. It's a tough job. It's a hard job. But it doesn't make them gunfighters. Ask any of them on a given week how much time they use their gun versus how much time they use a pen or a, probably more common today, a keyboard to write reports. That's the job. If you want to become a cop based on anything you've seen on TV, on some action show, just write that off. You're going to spend far more time sitting in your car or sitting behind the MDT or whatever they call the laptop in their agency, in their car or behind a computer desk or behind a piece of paper, writing reports and doing reports and going to court. Far, far more of that than any kind of firearms related thing. Likewise, the FBI. The FBI is not the Federal Bureau of Gunfighters. It is the Federal Bureau of what? Of Investigations. They're investigators. In fact, for quite a long time, federal agencies, including the FBI, weren't even allowed to be armed. Now, we can argue whether or not we think federal government agents should be armed. I don't want to get into that can of worms. The fact is now they are armed, and I don't see that going away anytime soon. In fact, we see a lot of militarization of police in the last couple of decades. For a long time, the FBI wasn't even allowed to be armed. Again, they're the Federal Bureau of Investigations. While we're on cops, a myth that it's their duty to protect you. You can argue whether or not it should be, but the courts have upheld several times, I believe, that it is not their duty to protect you. You might want to look into DeShaney versus Winnebago or Warren versus District of Columbia. Anyway, it's not. Here's the thing. Be a man. This is the Alpha Male Podcast. It's your duty to protect those weaker than you. It's your duty as a man. So stop shucking that responsibility and putting on somebody else. There was recently that big shooting where the police just stood outside a school and did nothing. Okay. Here's what I don't understand about that whole thing. You're telling me there was no able-bodied men in that entire school? Why weren't those men armed? Are none of them alpha males? I don't care what your actual job title is. You ought to see it as part of your duty as a man, as an alpha male, to protect those weaker and under your covering, under your headship, however you want to put it. There was no man in there, no teacher, no janitor who thought he might be a good idea to be armed and protect those around. Why does anybody have to wait for police to get there to do something? Why aren't you doing something? Here's a big myth that's going to make some people upset. You think that putting a badge on is going to give somebody morals and courage? You think just pinning a piece of tin on a breast pocket is going to give somebody a pair? It doesn't. It's a job. A lot of cops do that for the money and the pension and the retirement. That doesn't make one morally right or wrong. That's why you ought to see it as your duty as a man to be able to provide and protect those around you. So let's dispel that myth right now that it's somebody else's responsibility. It's your responsibility. So step up and be a man. Alright, let's finish off with something a little bit less intense. How about the myth that the AR is like the best do-it-all one gun? It just isn't. It isn't. The AR is very good as a battlefield assault weapon. That's where it shines. That's what it's been used for decades. It is a great gun. It is a very fun gun to shoot. It shoots a very high velocity, low caliber round. It gives it low recoil and high capacity. That's one of the reasons it's so good on the battlefield, right? It's the main reason we went to it from a bigger, full-powered rifle. Despite what the media might say, it's not a particularly powerful gun. In fact, it's very mild. It's very weak compared to most other center fire rifles. You know, your grandfather or great grandfather's 30-06. It's way less powerful than that. It is very modular. It is very adaptable. You can change out uppers and all kinds of different things. But it is not the best, one gun for a lot of things. It's not a do-it-all. It's not a Swiss Army knife. It's just not. Mostly because of the round. Now, you can get other uppers and different rounds. I'm not talking about that. But it's a niche round. Done a lot to it. Originally, the original military loading, I think, was a 55 grain. We've gone all the way up to 77 grains and some even heavier. But even so, it's a high-velocity, low-caliber round. It's good for what it was originally adapted for, from civilian use to military use. Yes, it started out designed by a civilian and based on a common, I believe, the Remington 222, a varmint cartridge, a civilian varmint cartridge. It's great for that. It's a great round for prairie dogs and coyotes and things like that. It's very good at wounding enemy soldiers and stopping them from fighting. It's not the best at that, but you gain a lot with capacity. But that being said, it's not a great stopping round, even for something like a deer. A lot of people hunt deer with ARs because they're very common. I get that. But it's not a great tool for it. I don't know of any serious hunter or guide that would say that a 223 AR is a better choice for deer hunting than a bolt action 308 or bolt action 30-06. It's just not. It's not as good for that. It's a good gun for what it's designed to do. High capacity, high volume of fire. Good at, let's call it, intermediate ranges from 0 to 500 yards. Really 0 to 300 yards. It's good for that. A lot of the bugs have been worked out from decades of refinement, but still, it's a very complex machine. If you want a go-to do-it-all gun, my belief on that. If I could only have one long gun, it's going to be the shotgun. You give up some range, yes, but most defensive encounters and a lot of big game hunting is done inside 150 yards. Shotgun's fine for that. It's great at close quarters CQB stuff. But here's where it shines as like a Swiss Army knife, the ability to change out different kinds of ammo. I can hunt a mourning dove and still be able to eat it. I can shoot a mourning dove not just off a power line, which you could do with an AR, although you probably wouldn't be able to eat much left. I can shoot a dove out of the air routinely. And I can use it to stop a charging grizzly bear. In fact, a lot of guides in grizzly country use 12 gauges with slugs. I can, with different loads, make optimal loads for home defense, for deer hunting, for bear defense. I can use it to signal. I can even use it for a less likely to be lethal option. They make less lethal rounds, which still can be lethal. I mean, if you shoot somebody in the face with a beanbag round at, contact distance, it might still kill them, but it's less lethal. So it is a lot more flexible. It is a lot more like a Swiss Army knife than the AR. A lot of people love ARs. I like ARs. I don't think it's the do-it-all, best for everything like a lot of people try and pretend that it is. Just because you have something and love something, look at it soberly. Look at it circumspectly. Can you hunt deer with an AR? Sure you can, and a lot of people do, and a lot of people hunt deer with a 223. But let's say that things have gotten bad and you and your family have not eaten for a couple of days. Your best chance to put food on the table for you and your kids is to take a deer. Assuming you have equal proficiency and practice with both weapons, and there's nothing wrong with either weapon, are you going to take an AR, or are you going to take a bolt-action 308? Or just like the reverse of that, maybe your best option is small game, doves, quail, heck, even robins or Tweety birds. Remember, you're hungry. You're going to be taking that AR, or you're going to be taking a shotgun. So they're good guns. They have a lot of advantages over a lot of other guns. But they're not the best do-it-all. They're not a do-it-all gun. They're very niche guns. So I guess that's the myth, that they're a do-it-all gun somehow. Alright, and there's one more I want to close on. It's a big one. Debt. What a weird myth. What a weird thing in society. We've made it seem to be good that you can buy something more than you can afford, be able to make minimum payments on it, to pay far more in the end than what the thing actually cost. What a weird, strange myth we've all told ourselves in this modern Western culture. Oh, you can't buy it? That's okay. You can still have it. You're just going to be a slave to your debt for who knows how many years and pay far more than that thing costs. But people will think you're cool because you have a nice, shiny thing. Anyway, big myth there. With that, guys, thanks for listening to the Alpha Male Podcast. If you want to support GoodShepherdTraining.com, if you think this is a message that you enjoy and other men should hear, the number one way to support is to become a patron. Again, you can get there via GoodShepherdTraining.com. I'll put a direct link right in the show notes if I remember. With that, the tactical tip of the day. This harkens back to when I was in the corporate world as the commander of a tactical team that made me corporate management, basically in a big organization, and I got crazy amounts of emails in a day. That was a big part of my day, was just checking and responding to emails. Well, I was blessed in my position with, I was a salaried employee, which means I didn't have to work hours specifically. I worked a lot of hours, don't get me wrong, but I had a little bit of freedom. So to lighten up the workload, one thing that I would do is check my emails. If there's a couple of different categories, ones that are just garbage emails, you don't even need to read or open. You can just delete them because they don't apply to you. You just get them carte blanche because everybody gets them. Those you can just delete. Some are really important and require your attention right now, so stop what you're doing and do them. Some you have to get to. You don't want to forget about them, but you don't have to get to them right now. So you can free up some time to read your Bible or work out or go to the gym or whatever. And you can go through your emails while you're doing a lot of other tasks. So if you need to get to it, let's say today or a little bit later or first thing in the morning, just forward it to yourself. Forward it to yourself. You don't even have to label it or anything. Just hit the forward button and forward it to yourself. And the next time you go in and check your emails, you'll know all the ones from you. Those are things you should be doing. Like the next time you go sit in your office to do administrative tasks. Okay, these are for me. I'm going to open these. I've already read them. There are things that I need to start doing right now. So that's a tactical tip of the day, forwarding emails to yourself that you need to get to the next time you have time. With that, hopefully what you've been waiting for, the tactical verse of the day. I solemnly charge you in the presence of God and Messiah Yeshua, who is about to judge the living and the dead at his appearing and his kingdom. Proclaim the word. Be ready when it is convenient or inconvenient. Confront, rebuke, and encourage with complete patience and instruction. Thanks, man. I'm very humbled and blessed that anybody listens to this podcast, and I'm very humbled and blessed to be able to share my thoughts and opinions with you, but more importantly, to share the Word of God with you. Thanks, and have a blessed day.